Ghost sneaked over to the other side of the tree and positioned himself, crouching next to a large bush, a few paces to the right of where the other man was standing. Chris on his feet was leaning against the trunk of another tree while observing the area which had ahead with pairs of binoculars. The darkness night allowed both men to camouflage themselves in their black military clothing. Chris wore military clothing similar to Ghost's, which means of no identification or for this type of mission, it wouldn't be necessary. Chris welded an FN scar on the monophyletic superior at the end of the barrel. Variable zoom optical sight with a thicker grip to remove recoil control and accuracy. In the holster in his waist, an FNP pistol with night sight and also with a suppressor. Ghost, a few steps away, kept his customized MCX spear in control, just attached to the superior and changed the optical sight to a 3x zoom. In the right holster of his waist, his trusty silver Ghost. In the left of his holster, his Desert Eagle, and finally his knife on the sheath on his shoulder. Both wore a helmet with night vision goggles and a headset with a microphone to communicate. I thought they put some security around the place after everything, Ghost said quietly, after he looked at the building ahead. It was a large orphanage, brought by Umbrella in the early 2000s and rebuilt. Surrounding the orphanage was a large courtyard, surrounded by a high wall with an electric fence on the top and security cameras. Considering that it was an Umbrella site, the security was very poor. Perhaps it would work in their favor. I noticed movement upstairs. Some children are being taken to their rooms. It looks like they're being injected with something, Chris said with venom in his voice, lowering his binoculars and shaking his head with a scorn anger. Give us confirmation when you get in. My team and I will be in charge of getting the children out, Jill said through the communicator. Hunk, what's the situation? Ghost asked, beckoning Chris to accompany him, and both he and began to slowly approach the orphanage. Most of the security cameras are outside. It won't be a problem once you get inside. There are 2 entrances to the laboratory in the underground. Most are used as though the principal's fan's office. That's where the teenagers go. The other entrance is 3 kilometers to the west, also used as a way of getting out without attracting any attention, Hunk answered in the communicator, and both soldiers remained crouched down, away from the lights of the orphanage, while still blending with the forest. I'll turn off the cameras and electricity for 15 seconds, cut the fence and go in. 32 meters from where you will be at the back door. I saw movement inside the building, so be careful, Hunk said, and the 2 soldiers nodded to each other, preparing to act. Go! The 2 moved quickly towards the wall ahead, and Ghost was fired first to scale up the wall, already holding his knife. He leaned on top of the wall and quickly cut through the electric fence, jumping into the courtyard shortly afterwards, followed by Chris. The 2 soldiers raised their weapons and walked, still crouched, but quickly towards the front door. He heard the sound of electric fence being activated again, just after they had put their backs against the wall. Chris moved up a few steps to the side and picked up the heart rate monitor. The device, greenish green screen, showed the 2 dots of standing mirrors from where they were, opposite to each other. Redfield signaled to Ghost, who then nodded, and they both leaned a little closer to the door, hearing muffled sounds coming from what seemed to be the kitchen. Tomorrow, remind me to get to the shopping list. I'll go to the market on my way back. They heard his male voice. They looked at each other for a moment. Whoever that man was, he was speaking English. Don't be long. Tan is going to be ad here with some security rules. We're going to transfer some of the equipment and put. A woman's footsteps followed something in glass being placed on the table. Ugh. Oh, it's just the same. It's normal passable soon, but he's still crying, the woman said, and Chris slowly opened the door, realizing that they had moved away. I know, right? How's the boy? The man asked. His voice was a little more muffled just because he was talking quietly, but they were also moving away. 2 soldiers entered the kitchen and grabbed their weapons quickly, seeing they're running their eyes over their surrounding. Nothing special here, just some ordinary kitchen. We've entered the kitchen. Ghost whispered in his communicator, taking slow, light steps as he tried to listen for any random noises. Anything unusual? Hunk asked. Well, no, apart from the fact that they're addicted to coffee. There must be 30 bags here, Ghost said, attracting the attention of Ghost, who looked at him with an arched eyebrow. Bring us some tea, Hunk said through the communicator, and Ghost grunted in response. Brits. He then heard a brief laugh coming from Hunk, from the communicator, ignoring Chris's serious but curious look, probably wondering about the sense of humor. They walked at a silent pace towards the door that led to the orphanage for good. There was a small window on the door, which Ghost examined for a few moments. In front was a canteen, its large tables and numerous chairs. The place was empty except for women on their back, with a passing cloth over their tables. It was late at night, and she was probably cleaning up before leaving for the room. Ghost signaled to Chris slowly open the door, sneaking up on the woman while Chris covered his back. The ancient grabbed his knife and acted quickly, covering the woman's mouth with his hand and stabbing her in the neck. He followed her body to the floor and dragged it towards the kitchen, while Chris checked the corridor ahead. To his left there was a door that led to a broom closet. The corridor went on for a few meters until it reached the main hall. It was spacious. There was a staircase leading up to the upper floors of where the bedrooms are. The female wing was on the right, and the male wing was on the left. If they continued down the corridor, they would reach the classrooms in a minute or two. The elementary school was still on the second floor, and the secondary school was on top of the first floor. Deactivating the security camera. There are 2 people approaching from the second floor. Eliminate them, then go upstairs to find the 3rd floor. That's where the director's office is, Hunk instructed over the communicator, and the 2 soldiers moved into position. Chris was the first to act when both people appeared on the line of sight. He quickly punched the man hard in the neck, knocking him out while Ghost knocked the second man down and killed him. The 2 looked at each other and Ghost cocked his head to one side. Afraid of getting your hands dirty? He asked, plunging his knife to the side of the man's head. Chris grimaced and didn't answer, just as Ghost turned away. 2 quickly grabbed the bodies and put them in the broom cupboard just above the floor below, heading upstairs in a few minutes later. It's quiet in here, Ghost muttered, more to himself than the others. Good update. Is the water still wet? Checking's on standby, Ghost said, and Chris stared at him with his eyebrows slightly furrowed. Are they still making jokes? Parker asked over the communicator. A bit of military humor, Ghost replied, raising his rifle to check either side of the 3rd floor corridor, spotting the director's office just to his left, perhaps 20 paces away. Just before it was another door that led to the office, usually where the meetings took place. Right now? Chris asked, and Ghost just shrugged. We've got at worse times. You'll get used to it, Ghost replied, walking at a slow pace towards the principal's office ahead. However, before they could get close enough, the door to the meeting room opened, and some teenagers as well as a few children came out of the corridor. Among them were the principal, Fanhan himself. The 2 agents backed away quickly, and Chris took a small audio from his belt, amplifying the voices hearing nearby and what they were saying. You're going to feel a bit strange, but tomorrow it'll pass. You'll be fine. We're finally going to apply the medicine to you. You can go to your rooms now, except Melee. Come with me, Fanhan said, and the 2 soldiers moved to hide, using the darkness around the place to camouflage themselves. They waited patiently for the children to descend the steps. It was impossible to notice not their condition. Their clothes were neat and looked new. Their hair was combed away and they looked healthy. However, their faces were pale, abnormally pale. They had dark circles under their eyes and downcast expressions. As they descended, the 2 soldiers came out of their hiding places and stared at each other for a few moments, agreeing with each other in affirmation. They soon climbed to the steps and walked into Fanhan's room. Fanhan has a girl in his room moving in now, Ghost said for the communicator. As they approached in front of the door, they listened for a few moments to the noises coming from inside. Ghost's eyes widened slightly and he seemed to be irritated and wary. Kristen looked at him with some doubt. He didn't understand Thai, so he couldn't understand what the man was saying. Quickly ignoring Chris's look of doubt, Ghost broke the lock on the door and a kick and ran into the room. His rifle raised in Fanhan's direction. Both he and the girl were startled by the sudden destruction of the door and the invasion of the two agents. But before Fanhan could scream or make a sound, Ghost landed a powerful punch to his face, then grabbed him by the neck of the back of the head and threw him against the table, preventing him from making a sound. Still confused, his eyes ran around. That's when he had noticed the frightened girl next to him. She was a young teenager, perhaps 15, maybe 16. She was scared and shaking, but what made his blood boil was the fact that she was scared, but the fact that she was without some of her clothes, and Fanhan was only in his boxers. Fucking hell, he grunted loudly, temporarily lowering his rifle and shaking his head, raised his hand and walked slowly towards the trembling, frightened girl, who hadn't even noticed him approaching. Redfield Ghost, what's the situation? That piece of shit was trying to abuse a girl, Chris said in the growl, immediately regretting when he saw the girl cornering the crowd in the room. Jill Parker, we need you here. He looked up and watched Ghost deal with that scumbag. He was gripping the man's neck tightly, almost choking him, and the sound Fanhan could make was a low grunt as he struggled. Hello, Fanhan. We are looking for you, Ghost said, as his voice was low and cold. His tone was angry and threatening, making Fanhan wind his eyes as he felt a shiver run down his spine. Interrupting the man by spinning him around on the table, Ghost leaves him leaning on the wooden structure, puts his arm around his neck. In one swift movement, he cut off 2 fingers, half another with his knife. Fanhan tried to scream, but Ghost's arm was around his neck had stopped him, only causing a grunt of pain to be heard. Spinning around him again, Ghost put his back on the table with his hand around his neck. English, motherfucker, don't waste my time, he said, holding his knife against the other man's hand. Chris, who just watched him without saying that he was doing in favor of torture. Usually with a few punches or a bullet would do the trick, but at the moment he certainly wasn't against it. Who the hell are you? The man asked, low, panting, and Ghost snorted in duration. None of your frickin' business. Now do us a favor and show us your little laboratory. If you cooperate, I won't stab you, Ghost said, waving his knife nimbly in his hand. The man looked at his knife and his mask a few times, holding a look in his eyes. Of course he would. He was a coward, nothing more. There's a button under the table, he said, and Ghost just looked at Chris, who walked over towards the table and bent down, pressing the button on the left-hand corner. The cabinet to the left of the table moved to the side, leaving the doors of the elevator now visible. Good boy, Ghost said, putting his knife back in his sheath for a few moments. Fanhan then felt a little more relieved, and he felt hope that he would live another day. However, he was wide-eyed when he felt himself being lifted off the table, forced to turn around, and then he had enormous pressure on his neck. I said I wouldn't stab you, but I never said I'd let you live, Ghost whispered in his ear, and in one swift moment, he broke Fanhan's neck. Quickly he guided the body of that dirtbag to the chair and dropped him down with some violence. He then turned around his eyes to meet Chris. Both men stared at each other for a few moments. Their eyes were serious, but with a sense of camaraderie between them. Ghost and Chris, Parker and I are already inside. What's the situation? Jill asked for the communicator and the man looked away. Fanhan's dead. There's a girl in the office. She's in shock. Get her in there as soon as possible, Chris explained, watching Ghost approach the elevator. Roger that, Jill replied, and the silence lasted for a few moments. He died too easy if you ask me, Chris said after a few moments, and Ghost turned his face towards him, looking over his shoulder. I agree. Unfortunately, the mission doesn't allow us to waste unnecessary time, however. Ghost then turns and walks over to Fanhan with his cell phone in hand. Chris just watched with a neutral face, a bit of curiosity in his eyes. Ghost then took a few photos of Fanhan's body, clearly showing his broken neck. When he finished, he put his cell phone back in his pocket and heard Chris approaching. So what are these photos for? Redfield asked. To pass on a message. The Thai government was once one of the black market's clients, and they have connections with China, Vietnam, India, even Australia, if I'm not mistaken, Ghost said, and Chris just shook his head, grunting in low understanding. The door to the office opened and Jill entered with a small team of 2 men and a woman called Rachel. They didn't say anything. The woman just ran her eyes around while focusing on the trembling girl in the corner of the room for a few moments and the dead man in the chair. A nod, that was all she said, before she started walking towards the girl, while the 2 soldiers headed towards the elevator. "We're in the elevator about to go down to the lab," Ghost said, through the communicator, and the elevator door opened. The 2 entered and began to descend. "Good, this lab is where most of the employees have gathered, but there aren't that many of them, and there shouldn't be too much of a threat. They're probably starting tests today's subjects. Eliminate everyone," Hunk said, and Chris grimaced. "Eliminate? Shouldn't we take them into custody?" Chris asked. The silence lasted for a few moments. "We asked for your help and work, Chris," Ghost began. "And that's our job. We don't arrest, no matter what. We eliminate. You agreed to help." Chris shook his head. He wouldn't be against it. Most of Umbrella's were lowlifes. "I can't think of any one reason, not one, but they have us for using children as subjects. In the past, I've met some people who didn't want to be a part of Umbrella, and they wanted out but were forced to stay. It wasn't their intention, but this is fucked up," Chris said. "Intentions don't matter. They did evil anyway. They helped it happen with millions of lives perish because of it. Whether it was mechanic who fixed the machine, or weapons supplier, or the electricity guy, any involvement is enough," Hunk explained. "Their interrogations may not be enough for the worst, but their actions were evil and all the same. Don't feel bad for them if they die. They all expect something similar by getting involved with this organization. They don't deserve your sympathy," Ghost said, trying to sympathize with Chris. He knew how to kill what the time was called. However, as a soldier was excitement, and that was the problem. As an excellent soldier, he was very sympathetic and attached to orders that was right under his rules and laws. Admirable, but the world didn't care. Chris continued to stare at him until the doors opened and he was forced to leave, with something to say. "What are we going to gain from this?" Chris asked as they walked down the empty corridor. Hunk had said they were going to do tests on subjects. Ghost stared at him. Chris didn't find it killing easy, but he did it anyway. In a way, he and a certain cop would run similar principles. "Fear," Ghost replied, checking on the inside of the rooms, then counting his way after seeing that it was empty. "We all got affiliates with the helpers. Everyone was involved as soon as we get to the computers. The loss of Umbrella shares have already spread on the global scale. The destruction the rest of the labs will soon spread, and the world of bioterrorism will officially end in a permanent state of fear," Ghost explained, signaling Chris to be quiet as he spotted 2 scientists up ahead. They were in front of a computer analyzing the X-ray, probably of one of the guinea pigs. The guinea pig in question had part of its skull deformed of what looked like a huge mouth with sharp teeth on the side of its head. Ghost sneaked up from behind them and both researchers acted quickly. First he plunged his knife into the back of one of the men's necks, grabbed another in swift advance, placing his hand over his mouth and breaking his neck in one swift movement. He picked up his knife and he watched the 2 bodies fall to the ground. The agent wiped away the blood stain on his blade and ran his eyes over the computer, plugging in his organization's hack device. "I'm getting some information from an old experiment. Apparently it was the key to Albert creating Ouroboros, which prevented that he had contact with Umbrella longer than we thought," Hunk said through the communicator, and Ghost snorted, crossing his arms as he waited for the device to act. "Is that how you scare these politicians?" Chris asked after a few moments, and Ghost continued to stare at the computer screen. "In a way, yes," he replied. "And these photos you take, do you send them back to black market clients or do you use something else?" Chris asked. "So far, only to the black market. However, it will be for the whole world," Ghost replied, and Chris's gaze turned sharp. "For the world? Do you really think that's a good idea?" Ghost stared at him calmly, his countenance its typical professional manner. "What's left of bioterrorism will be gone forever. These involved will be terrified, and all those good people, the victims, will be happy to know who caused them pain or rotten in hell. It was Hunk who had answered in Ghost's place. This will be the first and only time we will show in what we do. It doesn't matter if the media or the government's against it. The population is calm. Fear, Chris. It's enough to keep those scumbags in line, Ghost replied, and the device beeped after he had just finished hacking in the computer system. Ghost took the device and put it in the pocket of his tactical vest, leaving the room shortly afterwards, accompanied by Chris. Do you know why bioterrorism doesn't feel the fear of the BSAA? Ghost asked quietly, and Chris looked at him out of the corner of his eye. It's not because you're not skilled or weak, but it's because you follow the rules. You are limited by the laws of society, and they are not. The double doors opened automatically, and they approached with two pointed rifles in the opposite direction from each other, continuing on their way when they saw that the area was clear. They had no problem sending a message to the world, bragging about their attacks, the deaths, and they know you won't do the same. They take advantage of it. Now that it's our turn, bioterrorism has frightened the world, and we're going to frighten the bioterrorism. Ghost stared at Chris firmly now, his eyes glowing in intense blue, and the doubt that Redfield felt was mistrust, reduced a little, not to the point of completely trusting him and his actions, but to the point of understanding the logic behind them. Countering realization with even great realization. I like the idea, Parker said for the communicator, and the two soldiers focused their eyes on the corridor. Ghost took the lead and slowly opened the door ahead. They ran through the test lab. Most of the scientists and researchers were there, with several unconscious subjects on the stretchers. Some were being placed in water tanks and a few in tubes connected to their bodies. Both soldiers' blood boiled intensively. Most of the subjects were teenagers, maybe 17, 16 years old. So that's what they did. To about to turn 18 and leave the orphanage, they were taken somewhere that was not aroused suspicion. There were some children too, boys and girls. Chris stared at Ghost, who stared back at him after a few moments. Redfield gave away, and the two soldiers took loud steps forward, rifles raised, and pulled the triggers at the same time. Ghost took the lead, shooting at some of the scientists who had put some of the teenagers in a water tank, and rushing forward to kill those who tried to run. Chris even tried to follow his principles, tried to follow the BSAA field manual. To be quite honest with himself, it would have been naive of him to issue an arrest order from simply restrict them there. And they treated the lives of those children were mere objects, mere tools for their plans. So there was nothing wrong with doing the same. In a way, he and Ghost weren't that different. When they had finished, they both reloaded their rifles, and Ghost went straight to the computers, plugging in his hacking device and sending information present to Hunk. Meanwhile, Chris had looked at the carnage. The once white ground was now stained with red. Maybe it had something to do with his head, but he swore that the trails of blood were mixed with white formed by the umbrella logo. So many lost lives, some for something so profane. Chris, check the children. Disable anything if you can. Ghost's voice snapped him back in reality, and Chris shook his head, pushing the thoughts away. He hated Albert. He hated Umbrella. He didn't know why he was feeling so soft right now. They don't deserve it. Hunk, we've eliminated scientists. Information before it should be coming in soon. Estimated completion in 17 minutes, he said through the communicator, noticing the machines being switched off, but the victims fell unconscious. I'm receiving the information, Ghost. Our team has completed the other work, and the BSAA is doing well on their mission so far. We're very, very close, Hunk said, and Ghost nodded. With quick, heavy steps, he entered in towards the unconscious children. However, the loud thud of heavy objects falling to the ground caught his attention. Ahead, a man strained his posture, causing both soldiers to raise their rifles at him. The man was wearing an black overcoat, military boots and pants, and a black blouse, which he showed off his fingers. That was as striking with his white hair and delicate features. Anyone who saw him might have been a woman. Wow, and I thought umbrella assassins were scary. A man of medium height jumped out of the hole of the ceiling, landed next to the white-haired man. Ghost pupils eyes as he recognized the man, a famous black market dealer. who had sold samples of the T-virus to some African leavers. Ricardo Irving. He wore a white suit and black gloves. Irving, surprised to see you here, Ghost said, his voice cold as ice but not as hiding his disgust. Such a pleasure to despise me, he joked. You remember me? What honor. Although it's not actually a surprise. I thought you got in hiding after the fiasco in Africa. Or rather died, Ghost said, signaling to Chris to be careful. The Redfield approached in a slow pace, standing 5 paces beside the agent. Well, it was close, but with some important people owed me their favors, Irving said, signaling something from the man next to him, who began to remove his overcoat. 2 soldiers stared intently at the white-haired man's movements. He didn't look armed, but something was wrong. Very wrong. This one is Morphus. That's her nickname. I don't know her. Despite her appearance, she's a woman. She may not look like it, but she's a tyrant. 2 soldiers blink, and a tyrant with a human appearance? Nothing like it's ever been recorded. Are you listening, Hunk? He whispered over his mask covering his lips. Loud and clear, Hunk replied. However, this Morphus began to grunt. The muscles of her body began to struggle as if it had the life of her own. Her clothes began to tear and her skin became paler than it already was. Her eyes turned red and her left arm began to grow exponentially. Huge claws sprung up in the place of fingers. A bony structure lined the body with some kind of exoskeleton. The fuck? Ghost exclaimed slowly at the sight of the creature's female figure. He'd never seen a female tyrant before. Well, not that it would change much. Morphus is different from any other infected idiots. She follows my commands, Irving said, leaning lightly on the soldier of the tyrant, who then raised a pistol and fired at them. 2 soldiers quickly retreated, jumping back and taking cover as best they could, while trying to avoid the computers. If they were destroyed, they wouldn't get the information. I thought you were smarter than that, Irving, Ghost said loudly from behind a metal box. After everything I've done, everything that's happened, not only to Umbrella, but practically all of your clients, you still make the mistake of carrying on like this. You'll regret it, he growled, and Irving snorted in deliberation. Don't compare me to them. I'm in another, not after the world domination or anything like that. This is personal. You've ruined my job, Irving said this, and distinctive sound of something familiar echoed throughout the place shortly afterwards, followed by a sound of something landing on the ground. Who gave you permission to go ahead? I said I'm the one with the mask here. Ghost grunted, rolled his eyes as he heard Ida's voice. After hearing her little encounter, she had disappeared. They even considered that she was helping Albert, but they had no proof. Ghost stood up and pointed his rifle at the woman, who was wearing black military outfit, her black pants and boots, just a few grenades hanging from their waist, a black tactical shirt and vest. She stared at him with a smile on her lips, almost a smug. You've dropped the red. Someone learned a lesson, she said proactively, and the woman just snorted in nasal laughter. Irving snapped his fingers and the tyrant advanced towards Chris, who jumped back and watched the creature dug his claws to the ground. Ghost stared at him with wide eyes, and Redfield raised his rifle and fired at the tyrant as he stepped back. Realizing that his bullets didn't have much effort, no problem, he had armor-piercing bullets. I can handle it, don't worry, Chris shouted back, retreating the own corridor that used to get there, followed by Irving and the tyrant. I thought you were with Wesker, abandoned your master, Ida smiled, approaching at a slow pace while Ghost began circling at the same speed. How cute. You didn't talk as much before, Ida said, playing with the pistol in her hand. I work for whoever pays the most, or when I have a lot to gain. And unfortunately Albert was losing on the end, she said, without taking her eyes off the agent. She didn't seem to be as effective intensely as his gaze as he imagined, but she could still feel it. One slip and her head would roll across the floor. You decided to all ally yourself with Umbrella. What a terrible choice. They're finished, Ghost said, changing the mode of his rifle to automatic. Who says I'm working with you're just working for Umbrella? Ida said with an amused smile, and quickly pointed the pistol in his direction, pulling the trigger. Ghost's eyes widened slightly as he crouched down and threw himself to the side, returning fire towards the woman who had ran to the side and jumped over the metal boxes in the room. Did you know you're on the news? She asked, straightening her posture while still pointing the pistol in the agent's direction. It's all over the world. Many have seen you, and many have contacted me. They want you dead, but they're too cowardly to do it themselves. Ghost grunted softly. Good. They're desperate, he said. Ida cocked her head to one side. But it was a mistake to come after me. If I remember correctly, I was about to kill you last time. Were you thinking of me? She asked, putting the pistol back in his holster and picking up the submachine gun. Because I was thinking about you. Ghost grunted softly, firming his grip on his rifle. That's all I need for now, thanks, girls, the man named Josh said, placing some medical supplies onto the table next to the unconscious patient. Are you sure you don't need anything else? Claire asked, both her hands on her waist as she looks around. No, thank you. The situation's gradually resolving itself. You've been a great help to all of us. It's almost night, and you gotta get some rest. You can leave these things for us for now on. You deserve it, Josh said. Claire Sherry waved to him before leaving the tent, and the youngest Redfield picked up her cell phone, checking for messages. Still nothing from Chris, Sherry said, watching Claire massage her shoulder in the sight of exhaustion. These missions take time, he'll be fine, she said, looking calm at the outside, but Sherry knew it was masked to worry the inside. She and Chris were a lot alike in regard. Ugh, I'm getting fed up with that hotel, Sherry said in the grunt, glancing at the watch on her wrist. It wasn't even 7 p.m. yet. Tell me about it. Looks like that bed's got me off stiff. Claire grumbled too, lightly to massage the side of her neck. How about a little workout? Sherry asked. When was the last time you really trained? Claire snorted. Before my leg got fucked up. Fuck, it still throbs at night, Claire said, sighing. Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt. Good, Sherry celebrated lightly, and they headed towards where Chris's private tent, which was what's left of their backpacks, were their clothes and belongings during the day. It was better than leaving it at the hotel. They knew that no one would be stupid enough to break into Chris's tent and take what's left inside. I was thinking of going to that restaurant tonight, Claire began, stowing her clothes in her backpack after changing. They say this is the best barbecue in town. I heard that too, apparently. It's quite expensive, Sherry said, tying her hair into a normal ponytail. It's worth a look, Claire said, leaving the tent accompanied by Sherry, who ran her eyes around. There were a few people around. Most were concentrated on the medical tents, and soldiers that were standing on guard or in their respective tents. There's a great place around here, Sherry said, beckoning Claire for her to follow, and the two started walking towards a small field that would serve as a training ground. So how about letting me off the hook today? Claire arched an eyebrow, and then she saw the girl's saturating smile. Nobody needs to know, Claire huffed, lightly pushing the girl aside. Not a chance. I won't let you drink, Sherry grunted. I can shoot, I can drive, but I can't drink? That's kind of logic, is it? You're still underage. So what? Do you really think alcohol will do me harm? My body will eliminate the toxins within a matter of moments. Claire laughed lightly. Sherry couldn't possibly get drunk since her body eliminated that kind of toxin quickly. Well, technically she didn't need an age restriction to drink. It doesn't matter. You won't drink until you're 21, Sherry snorted. You didn't want to wait until you were 21. Do as I say, not as I do. Unfair. After walking when they arrived at the place Ghost and Sherry had used for training that week. So what do you have in mind? A brief hand-to-hand session? Claire asked, before they reached a sweet spot, and Sherry took a few steps back. Yeah, nothing too heavy. Just enough to work up a sweat. You think you can do it? Sherry asked in mild defiance, and Claire just got into attack position. Are you kidding? You're still 10 years too young to beat me, Claire said, and Sherry also got into attack position. They slowly circled each other, analyzing, waiting. Claire's serious gaze seemed to roam over the girl in front of her. She was different somehow. Her posture, although similar, was different. It showed what she had been training recently. After what seemed like minutes, Claire advanced first, reflexing her arm and tried to punch Sherry. The girl's eyes widened and she quickly retracted, blocking Claire's blow to Sherry's stomach. However, the girl managed to dodge to the right and her body, turned and tried to heel kick towards Claire's chin, which deflected by ducking. Not stopped there, Sherry jumped with her lower leg, still in the momentum of her previous one, and tried to kick towards the woman's neck, was forced with a huge step back. Claire blinked a few times. Her fighting style remained the same, but a few distance differences. She wasn't in a training alone. She was helping her, incorporating some techniques into her fighting style. Chris's base was there, strong and precise blows, but there was something else. A certain agility, a pinpoint precision that didn't require a lot of strength. A lot of her blows were aimed at vital points. The two women stared at each other for a few moments. Claire took a step forward, and Sherry took a step back. She was waiting for the older woman to make its first move. She wanted to save the movement, conserve energy, but no, she wanted to end it, with all the little movement as possible. Claire advanced, and Sherry prepared for the blows. However, Claire quickly stopped her advance, took a quick step back to the left, and tried a vertical blow from below. The girl's eyes widened slightly, and she dodged in reflex, throwing her torso backwards. Claire acted quickly and turned her body, attempting to kick Sherry's stomach. The girl gritted her teeth and stepped to the left, dodging the attack and countering, with a punch to the woman's liver. Claire grunted and gritted her teeth from the intense pain, and she stepped back, dodging Sherry's sequence of punches. Ignoring the pain in the side of her body, she advanced again against Sherry, who turned her body and tried to kick in her direction. However, Claire grabbed her leg, blocking the blow. Sherry then jumped with another leg and tried to kick. However, her movement, although effective, was too slow, and Claire ducked, still turning around and crouching her body, landed a kick to Sherry's stomach, who fell to the ground with hands all over the infected area, grunts of pain escaping from her mouth. "Are you all right?" Claire asked, approaching with her hands on her waist. Sherry would recover from that in no time. "Oh, fuck, I almost got you in that one, huh?" Sherry said, getting up a few moments after, the pain fading quickly. "I was taking it easy on you," Claire said, and Sherry just rolled her eyes. "Your fighting style has changed. Who taught you those moves?" The girl smiled half-heartedly and ran a hand through her hair, fixing her ponytail, which had become a little loose. "I asked Ghost for some tips, and he agreed to help me with training," she replied, and Claire arched her eyebrows in surprise. "So, Ghost is training you?" she asked, surprise evident in her voice. "Well, yes, it's been a week. He helped me with my fighting style. He gave me some tips and taught me some moves. I could say I'm now good with a knife." Claire snorted in the nasal laughter, still surprised and crossing her arms. "He was teaching you knife fighting? I thought you weren't so keen on the knife." Sherry shrugged. "Because I wasn't very good. It was a bit awkward. But now in a while, I dare say you won't beat me in close combat," she said with a teasing smile, picking up her knife and twirling it in her hand, not in the same way as Ghost, as she lacked the speed of the agility, but enough to show that she had progressed. "That's strangely nice of him," Claire said. "What do you think?" Sherry arched a confused eyebrow and stopped playing with her knife.